When a narcissistic woman hurts the one person who gave her everything, the first thing that happens is subtle, but profound. Her sense of control begins to fracture. Control, for the narcissistic psyche, is not merely about dominance over another person. It is about regulating inner chaos. The devoted partner serves as an external stabilizer, a reliable mirror that reflects admiration, loyalty, and emotional availability on demand. As long as that mirror remains in place, the inner world feels coherent, even powerful. But when the empath withdraws, emotionally, psychologically, or physically, the structure collapses. What disappears is not simply attention, but predictability. The narcissistic woman suddenly encounters resistance where there was once accommodation, silence where there was once reassurance. This is deeply unsettling because it exposes a truth she has long avoided. Her influence was never absolute. It depended entirely on the other person's willingness to give. From a Jungian perspective, this moment activates the shadow. The narcissistic persona, carefully constructed to project confidence and superiority, can no longer fully contain what lies beneath. Anxiety creeps in, not always consciously, but through restlessness, irritability, or a compulsive need to reassert dominance. She may attempt to provoke reactions, rewrite the narrative, or escalate emotional pressure, not because she feels strong, but because she feels her grip loosening. What makes this fracture so destabilizing is that it confronts her with individuation's opposite. Instead of developing inner authority, she has outsourced it. The empath's departure forces an encounter with inner emptiness, a space she does not know how to inhabit. Control was never about the other person, it was about avoiding this confrontation. And here is the quiet paradox. The more she tries to regain control through manipulation or aggression, the more visible her loss of it becomes. Power that must be proven is already slipping away. The healed empath does not need to fight back. Their absence speaks louder than any argument. So the deeper lesson is this. When you stop offering yourself as someone else's emotional anchor, you don't just reclaim your freedom. You return them to themselves. And whether they grow from that encounter or collapse under it depends on a choice only they can make. After control begins to fracture, something else follows almost inevitably. The mask starts to slip. The narcissistic woman's public identity, composed, confident, desirable, self-assured, has never been a spontaneous expression of the self. It is a carefully managed construction, designed to secure admiration and avoid exposure. As long as there is a devoted partner absorbing emotional turbulence and affirming her narrative, this mask can be maintained with relative ease. But once that stabilizing presence is gone, the effort required to hold the persona together becomes exhausting. Small inconsistencies appear first. She may seem unusually irritable, defensive, or bitter in situations that once would not have affected her. The charm that once felt effortless begins to feel strained, even mechanical. These are not random changes in mood. They are signs of a psyche under pressure, struggling to uphold an image without the internal structure to support it. In Jungian terms, the persona has become over-identified. When it can no longer be reinforced externally, the repressed material beneath it pushes upward. Emotions she has long disowned, envy, insecurity, dependency, and shame, begin to leak through in indirect ways. She may overreact to minor slights, interpret neutrality as rejection, or become unusually preoccupied with how she is perceived. What emerges is not authenticity, but instability. This is often the phase where others begin to notice that something is off, not because she suddenly becomes honest, but because the performance loses coherence. The contradiction between who she claims to be and how she behaves grows harder to ignore. And paradoxically, the more she attempts to restore the mask through exaggerated confidence, superiority, or victimhood, the more transparent it becomes. For the person who once gave her everything, this moment can be disorienting. They may finally see what was always there, but never fully visible. The slipping mask reveals not strength, but fragility, not certainty, but fear of exposure. It is not cruelty that is exposed, but emptiness desperately trying to remain unseen. The deeper insight here is this: when someone's identity depends on constant validation, authenticity becomes impossible. And the moment you stop participating in the illusion, you give yourself permission to see clearly, and to walk away without guilt. After the mask begins to slip, a quieter and more unsettling consequence emerges: a deep, largely unconscious sense of loss. This is not the kind of loss that expresses itself through grief, reflection, or remorse. It is far more elusive. What the narcissistic woman loses is not merely a relationship, but a psychological function that the other person was performing for her every day. The one who gave her everything served as an emotional regulator, a stabilizing presence, and most importantly, a mirror. Through that mirror she could see herself as significant, desired, and secure. Without it, the inner world becomes strangely hollow. From a Jungian standpoint, this is the loss of a projected self. Qualities she could not generate internally: worth, coherence, emotional continuity, were unconsciously assigned to the other. When that person leaves, those projections collapse, and with them the illusion of inner fullness. Because this loss is not consciously acknowledged, it cannot be mourned. Instead, it manifests as restlessness, dissatisfaction, or a vague sense that something is missing everywhere she goes. New attention may be sought, new admirers quickly engaged, yet none of it quite restores what was lost. The psyche remembers, even if the ego refuses to. Each replacement feels slightly insufficient, slightly less convincing. This is why the narcissistic woman often appears unchanged on the surface, while becoming increasingly unsettled beneath it. She may insist she has moved on, that the other person was insignificant, even burdensome. But this dismissal is not strength, it is defense. To admit the depth of the loss would require acknowledging dependence, vulnerability, and emotional need. Experiences that threaten her carefully maintain self-image. For the one who was hurt, understanding this dynamic can be liberating. The absence you leave behind is not a sign of your weakness or replaceability, but of your psychological impact. You were not interchangeable. You were integral to a structure that could not sustain itself without you. The reflection to carry forward is this: when you stop offering yourself as someone else's source of meaning, you do not disappear. You become the missing piece they can never quite replace. As this unconscious loss deepens, another mechanism is set in motion. Shame quietly transforms into projection and blame. Shame, for the narcissistic psyche, is intolerable. It threatens the fragile structure. That depends on superiority and self-justification. To feel shame would require acknowledging personal limitation and moral responsibility, an encounter with the shadow that feels to her psychologically annihilating. So the psyche does what it has long practiced. It redirects. From a Jungian perspective, projection is not deception but defense. What cannot be accepted internally is expelled outward and assigned to another. The discomfort she cannot name becomes the other person's fault. The empath who once gave endlessly is redefined as demanding, unstable, ungrateful, or even cruel. This reframing is not a conscious lie, it is an unconscious attempt to preserve coherence. If she is not at fault, then the collapse makes sense. If the other is defective, then she remains intact. This is why narratives change so abruptly. Private devotion is replaced by public dismissal. Intimacy gives way to character assassination. The goal is not truth, but relief. By locating the source of pain outside herself, she temporarily escapes the inner tension created by loss and exposure. Yet this relief is short-lived. Projection must be constantly reinforced, repeated, and defended, because reality continues to press inward. For the one who was hurt, this phase can be especially destabilizing. Being blamed after giving everything creates cognitive and emotional dissonance. Many begin to doubt their own perceptions, wondering how love could be rewritten so completely. But this confusion is not evidence of your failure, it is evidence of a defense at work. You are being cast into a role that allows her to avoid facing herself. Jung reminds us that what we most vehemently reject in others is often what seeks integration within us. The accusations directed at you often reveal precisely what she cannot bear to see in her own psyche. Recognizing this allows you to step out of the false narrative without needing to correct it. The closing insight is this: when blame replaces reflection, growth becomes impossible. And the moment you stop carrying someone else's projected shame, you reclaim your clarity, and with it, the freedom to move forward grounded in truth. Once projection and blame can no longer fully contain the inner disturbance, a more primitive emotion begins to surface. Emotional panic. This panic is rarely obvious or openly admitted. It hides beneath confidence, arrogance, or apparent indifference. But psychologically, it is one of the most revealing stages. What emerges here is not fear of being alone, but fear of becoming irrelevant. For the narcissistic woman, attention is not a luxury. It is regulation. It reassures her that she exists, that she matters, that she still holds power. When the person who once provided consistent emotional supply is gone, and worse, no longer reacting, the nervous system registers this as a threat. From a Jungian view, the ego senses the collapse of its compensatory structure. Grandiosity was never self-generated, it was reinforced. Without reinforcement, anxiety fills the gap. This is why behavior often becomes more erratic at this stage. She may suddenly seek visibility, admiration, or validation with urgency. New relationships appear quickly, social displays intensify, and emotional signals become exaggerated. Alternatively, she may attempt to provoke the former partner through indirect messages, sudden warmth, calculated hostility. The goal is not reconnection, but reassurance that she can still elicit a response. Silence is what truly unsettles her. What looks like confidence is often desperation disguised as control. Emotional panic drives the need to be seen, chosen, and desired, not for intimacy, but for stabilization. And yet no amount of external attention fully resolves the anxiety. Each interaction soothes momentarily, then fades, requiring another. The system becomes addictive, compulsive, and increasingly hollow. For the one who was hurt, this stage is critical. This is where many are tempted to re-engage, to explain, to defend, or to seek closure. But responding does not bring resolution. It reactivates the very dynamic that caused the harm. The healed empath understands something essential here. Absence is not cruelty, it is clarity. Jung spoke of the danger of avoiding inner work through external substitutes. Emotional panic is the psyche's signal that something essential has been neglected within. Whether that signal leads to self-examination or further distraction is a choice she must face alone. The reflection to hold on to is this: when someone panics at your silence, it is not proof of your importance to them. It is proof that your presence once sustained what they could not sustain themselves. And choosing not to return is not abandonment, it is self-respect. After emotional panic runs its course, the final pattern quietly reasserts itself: repetition. The narcissistic woman moves forward, but not forward in the psychological sense. She repeats the same relational structure with new people, believing that novelty will succeed where depth failed. From the outside, it may appear as resilience or reinvention. From within, it is compulsion. The psyche returns to what is familiar, not because it works, but because it feels safe. In Jungian psychology, repetition without reflection is a sign that the unconscious has not been integrated. The same dynamic is recreated in a new form, with a new face, yet driven by the same unresolved inner conflict. Another admirer appears, another emotional bond forms quickly, another mirror is installed. But something has shifted. The experience is thinner now, less nourishing. The psyche remembers the earlier devotion, the depth of presence that once stabilized her inner world. Each new connection offers stimulation, but not restoration. This is where the tragedy lies. The pattern continues, but fulfillment diminishes. What once felt powerful now feels mechanical. What once felt intoxicating now requires more effort, more performance, more control. Without inner development, external validation loses its potency. And yet, to stop repeating the pattern would require facing the original loss, the shame, and the emptiness that repetition was designed to avoid. For the one who gave everything, this realization can bring unexpected closure. You were not rejected because you lacked value. You were lost because you mattered. The depth you offered cannot be replicated through surface-level attention. You were not simply a chapter in a story. You were the standard by which all future encounters will be measured, whether consciously or not. Jung believed that individuation begins when repetition is interrupted by awareness. Until that interruption occurs, the cycle persists. But here is the crucial distinction. Your healing does not depend on her awakening. It depends on your willingness to break your own repetition, to stop overgiving, to stop explaining, to stop returning to what cost you yourself. So the final reflection is this. When you step out of a cycle that someone else is doomed to repeat, you do not lose your place. You transcend it. And that single act of self-respect becomes the moment your life truly moves forward.